I'm at Wildwood on the Ranger side, and if you ever wonder why we call it Ranger, that's an old Ranger station. I want to talk about this. I think it's important to talk about this. This is the Mongoose Ledge X1. I think I've even covered up or peeled off the sticker that says Ledge X1, but this is Project Ledge X1, a bike that I spent over $3,000 on. And yes, you heard that correctly, over $3,000, probably even a little more, has inched up now because these are new Continental Mountain King tires, the original set. I sold those to someone else, needed tires at some point, on a bike that I think these came out in 2021. And how we got back to this was obviously now the big bike is the Ozark Trail Slalom FS.2, which is a very awesome bike, a lot of potential in it. I've already started some upgrades. You're going to see a series of videos coming soon on that as soon as I get them edited. And that FS.2 Slalom has brought a lot of new subscribers here to KevCentral. And new subscribers tend to go back and look at the back catalog of videos, and that's where they come across this Mongoose Ledge. Many have never seen it before. And then they get to my upgrade videos on this bike and see that I spent over, I'm claiming, to have spent over $3,000 on it. And a lot of them are going, no way, man. There's no way. You spent $3,000 on this. Well, first off, the $3,000 is including the frame, which was, I believe, $398 at the time this came out. But yeah, I did. I spent over $3,000, but you have to understand one thing. That was in 2021, and that was peak parts shortage. There was a lot of stuff you couldn't get. For example, these brakes. I'll have to go back and watch the video, but I know I paid way more at the time I made this build than I had ever paid for this caliber of brakes. And don't get me started with how much I had to spend on this fork at that time. I mean, it was slim pickings back then. That was peak post, the plague. And that was also peak, couldn't get parts at all, so everything was super expensive. And that all added up. So what I'm going to do today, since people are new to this bike, I'm getting the expected question, should I get this or should I get the new Ozark Trail Slalom FS.2? And I'll admit this Mongoose Ledge X1 frame is still pretty appealing to me. And it's on sale right now on the Walmart website. It's on clearance, $301. And for me, this has held up, even this suspension system. And this shock, a RockShox Monarch, that was kind of the best I had put on a project bike up at that point because I try to stay budget focused, but this was, well, it was expensive at that time, especially the adapters. But it's a good performer, and this has hung in. That was 2021, and this shock is the one that a lot of people are buying for their FS.2 Slalom to upgrade. And I understand. A lot of them, I think, saw it on this bike. People that have been around for a while and decided that's the way I want to go. Well, I went there with this bike and spent bigger bucks than it costs now. Now it's a budget option in the RockShox lineup. Well, it's always kind of a budget option in the RockShox lineup, but it's more affordable now than it was when I did this. But this pivot system, the rear shock, everything, this front fork, all that came together to make a really, really good bike. And I'm not going to go over every component. I have a video I'll link down in the description that does that. But I do want to say, the one thing that costs the most on this, and I think to this day it's still going to cost the most on this, would be these carbon wheels. These are Bontrager carbon wheels. Bontrager Line Elite 30 carbon fiber, as I've already mentioned. These were good wheels, expensive wheels back in 2021. I think still expensive wheels today, but these specific ones even more expensive. And there's a reason for that. The rear spacing on this bike is old school, quick release. This has a quick release, no through axle. Old school quick release rear spacing. So I had to buy wheels. I had to buy aluminum Bontrager wheels to get basically the hubs. And then I had to buy carbon fiber Bontrager wheels. Wheels that had the width that I needed to mate with the tires that I knew I was going to use. And then the bike shop went to work taking the hub and the spokes off of the aluminum set and putting them onto the carbon fiber rims. And yeah, that added up. That was, at that time, around $1,500 as far as I remember. It was maybe even 16. It was so far in that when I got the bill for it, I was quite shocked. And the reasoning, I had to have wheels, again, peak shortage time, so, you know, grasping at straws trying to get stuff. But also I had to have wheels that, because of this rear spacing being more narrow, I had to have some that had adapters that could be adapted down to fit this. But even outside of 2021 scarcity, there's just a lot of good components here. So this is not a cheap build at all. It's a very expensive build and a very good build. And that's going to get me back to the question of, should you go? Should someone go FS.2 Slalom or buy a ledge at the clearance price and start putting parts on it? Well, look, if you're new here, you may have never heard me say this. If you've been around for a while, you've heard me say it a lot. I don't tell anyone what they should do. I don't make recommendations. I only share my opinions and my experiences. And my opinions are, the Ledge is a really good bike. And if I could get one super cheap, I don't know about getting one for $301 today, if I had the choice myself. $301 for this, and then putting parts on it, versus buying an FS.2 Slalom for what are those? $500. Let's round it up. Say $500, $448 sometimes. If you catch a link under my video, those YouTube feeds have deals sometimes. Today, I would go with the FS.2 Slalom for me. Again, this is all my opinions. I don't tell anyone what they should do for themselves. But I would go FS.2 Slalom, not because this isn't awesome. I would go FS.2 Slalom because of the pivot system. I think the pivot system on the Slalom, this one's held up fine for me. It's worked out well. But I do think the pivot system on the Slalom, I mean, this is going to have down in here, you can see that nut there, the silver one, there's going to be a little nylon spacer in there. There's stuff on this that doesn't exist on the FS.2 Slalom. I think it's built a little more robustly. But again, this holds up well. I mean, if you can come across one of these for very, very cheap, it's still a good bike, still has a tapered head tube, still has modern geometry, but it's the geometry that's also another reason that I think a lot of people will like the FS.2 Slalom, because there is, quote, modern geometry, and it's very slack up front. For a full suspension mountain bike in 2025, people want a super slack head tube angle. Now, me personally, I prefer something like this. Still slack though. I mean, still definitely, you can look at this, still slack, but not as slack as the FS.2 Slalom. For me, this is a little better riding around, especially trails like here at Wildwood, even on the Ranger side. This will be a better bike for here, in my opinion, but it's not a better bike overall. It just seems to me that the FS.2 Slalom would be the better choice for most people in 2025, unless you can get this at a super deal and start throwing parts on it. Or even if this is all you can get, if you can't find a Slalom and you come across one of these, well, I can tell you, this build here has held up and it's working great, and it's a lot of fun to ride. Given the components here, I don't have any problem trusting this bike to do anything that I'll ever need to do on it. Again, I'm the average rider, the average skill, but there bearings back here as far as I remember. Good stuff. The components that I've added, tried and true, some of them budget, but have always performed well for me. This Advent X gives me the range that I need. You know, I talked about these tires, me having put new tires on this. And by the way, these nubbins, if you're just riding on trails, you'd be surprised how long they hold up. On my aluminum comp, I rode it for months and months and months, every day before they finally went away. But I think this may even be a second Advent X setup. It seems like at some point, or at least the cassette maybe, it seems at some point I had to give one away to someone locally or sell one to someone locally until I could get a replacement. But all these components, I mean, it's a good build. It's a very good build. I've been very happy with this. This X Fusion dropper, not the fastest of any droppers that I've ever used, but the most reliable as far as how long it can sit up without freezing. So yeah, good components here. I even like my head tube badging. How about that? That looks so good on this bike with the orange theme. The KevCentral head tube badging. You can buy these stickers. I'll put a link down in the description. I have a merch shop on eBay where you can actually buy KevCentral stickers. But I thought it was time to go over this. Just discuss quickly FS.2 or find a ledge on clearance and go for it, and talk about $3,000. Really? Did that happen? Yes, that really happened. Again, link in the description. You can see it all for yourself. I go through everything, how much I spent for all the different components, but that was 2021 pricing. And to this day, very, very awesome. But let me recap really quick here to close out. Because of the rear spacing and because there's a slightly, in my opinion, more robust pivot system, especially down here on the FS.2 Slalom, and because just thinking in the vein of someone buying in 2025, the geometry that people tend to be looking for here, even though I think this is a more fitting geometry for most riders and most trails, I'm gonna say the FS.2 Slalom probably the best buy, unless you just happen to get this super, super cheap. You know, you can find those crazy closeouts at Walmart. If you can find one of those, go for a Ledge X1. You're probably gonna be pretty happy. Otherwise, go for the FS.2 Slalom, at least in my opinion, if I were shopping for myself today, 2025. And be sure you go back and watch the video where I put all these parts on, why and when I selected them, and how much they cost me, because you're going to be surprised. It adds up quick, especially in scarcity market shopping. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Drop any questions down in the comments. I'll see you in the next video.